Chapter 7, A Tiger in the House. This is a story written by how a tiger was adopted by the grandfather of the author. Timothy, the tiger cub, was discovered by grandfather on a hunting expedition in the Terry jungle near Dehra. Dehra means Dehradun. So the tiger cub, that is Timothy, his name was discovered by the author's grandfather when he went for an expedition. Expedition is a journey which is specially for hunting or a recreational journey. So he went for that, and there he discovered this tiger cub. Grandfather was no shikari. He was not a shikari, but as he knew the forest of the Sivalik hills better than most people, he was persuaded to accompany the party. It consisted of several very important persons from Delhi to advise on the terrain and the direction the beater should take once a tiger had been spotted. He would advise them on the mountain, the type of mountain range where they would find the tiger, and when they should start attacking when they spot the tiger. The camp itself was sumptuous. Sumptuous was very luxurious type of a camp it was. 7 large tents, one for each shikari, a dining tent, and a number of servants' tent were there. The dinner was very good, as grandfather admitted afterwards. It was not often one saw hot water plates, finger glasses, and 7 to 8 courses in a tent in the jungle. So it was really a very luxurious type of a camp. Also, he goes on to say, but that was how things were done in the days of the viceroys. Viceroys were the British rulers that were there at that time. There were also some 15 elephants, 4 of them with the hodas. Hodas are the square machan kind of things that are made to sit, that are put above the elephants to sit. So those special hodas were made for the shikaris to sit, and the others specially trained for taking part in the beat, for hunting, that is. Beat means hunting. The sportsmen never saw a tiger, nor did they shoot anything else, though they saw a number of deer, peacock, and wild boar. They were giving up all hope of finding a tiger and were beginning to shoot at jackals when grandfather, strolling down the forest path at some distance from the rest of the party, discovered a little cub about 18 inches long, hiding among the intricate meaning delicate, roots of a banyan tree. Grandfather picked him up and brought him home after the camp had broken up. Broken up means finished or was over. He had the distinction of being the only member of the party to have bagged any game, dead or alive. That means he was the only person in the whole group of the party that had come to hunt who was able to, either dead or alive, to get a tiger in hand. Despite he didn't shoot, he didn't do anything, but in spite of that he got a tiger cub home. So he was the only person in that whole group who was able to get a tiger home. At first, the tiger cub who was named Timothy by grandmother, was brought up entirely on milk given to him in a feeding bottle by our cook, Mahmood. The name of the cook was Mahmood, and he would give him the milk in a feeding bottle because he was a small baby cub. But the milk proved too rich for him. It was too heavy or maybe too rich for his body, and maybe he must be growing in weight. And he was put on a diet of raw mutton and cod liver oil, to be followed later by a more tempting diet of pigeons and rabbits. So that was the diet Timothy got later on after the milk was stopped. Timothy was provided with two companions, that is, two friends. Toto the monkey, who was bold enough to pull the young tiger by the tail, and then climb up the curtain if Timothy lost his anger, and a small mongrel puppy found on the road by grandfather. These were the two friends that he had. At first, Timothy appeared to be quite afraid of the puppy and darted back as a spring if it came too near. He would make absurd dashes at it with his large forepaws, and then retreated to a ridiculously safe distance. That means Timothy was very scared initially of the puppy, and it would run back, dart back, jump out or jump back to a very big distance. Finally, he allowed the puppy to crawl on his back and rest there. Later on, they became so friendly that the puppy would sit on his back and go to sleep. One of Timothy's favorite amusements was to stalk anyone who would play with him. And so, when I came to live with grandfather, I became one of the tiger's favorites because the author would play with the tiger, so he became favorite, and the tiger would go after him. With a crafty look in his glittering eyes, with a mischievous look in his shining eyes, and his body crunching, he would creep closer and closer to me. With his jumping around, he would come close to the author, suddenly making a dash for my feet, rolling over his back and kicking with delight, and pretending to bite my ankles. And that was all done in a playful mood. He was by this time the size of a full-grown retriever. Retriever is the species of dogs. And when I took him out for walks, people on the road would give us a wide berth. That means they would give a lot of space because the tiger looked ferocious to them. When he pulled hard on the chain, I had difficulty in keeping up with him. His favorite place in the house was drawing room, and he would make himself comfortable on the long sofa, reclining. On the sofa he would sit as it's seen in the picture, and he would love to sit there with great dignity, and snarling at anybody who tried to get him off. Like he would try to show his authority in that place. Timothy had clean habits and would scrub his face with his paws exactly like a cat. He slept at night in the cook's quarters and was always delighted at being let out by him in the morning. One of these days, declared grandmother in her prophetic manner. One day grandmother said, in a very prophetic manner, as though prophesying, telling what would happen ahead, we are going to find Timothy sitting on Mahmud's bed and no signs of the cook except for his clothes and shoes. That means grandmother was saying that Timothy will one day eat him up. Of course, it never came to that. It didn't come to that point. But when Timothy was about 6 months old, a change came over him. That means his behavior started to change. He grew steadily less friendly. That means he slowly became less friendly. When out for a walk with me, he would try to steal away to stalk a cat or someone's pet. Pekingese. Now, Pekingese is a species of dog. Sometimes at night, one would hear frenzied crackling from the poultry house, and in the morning there would be feathers lying all over the veranda. So all these things, strange things, started to happen after Timothy became 6 months. Timothy had to be chained up more often, and finally, when he began to stalk Mahmud about the house with what looked like villainous intent, grandfather decided it was time to transfer him to a zoo. That means now finally it started to seem that Timothy was becoming ferocious and couldn't be kept at home. So grandfather decided to put him in the zoo. The nearest zoo was at Lucknow, 200 miles away. Reserving a first-class compartment for himself and Timothy, no one would share a compartment with them. Grandfather took him to Lucknow, where the zoo authorities were only too glad to receive as a gift a well-fed and fairly civilized tiger. So grandfather took him to the zoo at Lucknow. About 6 months later, when my grandparents were visiting relatives in Lucknow, grandfather took the opportunity of calling at the zoo to see how Timothy was getting on. I was not there to accompany him, but I heard all about it when he returned to Dehra. Arriving at the zoo, grandfather made straight for the particular cage in which Timothy had been interned. That means he was kept there. The tiger was there, crunching in the corner, full grown and with a magnificent striped coat. He looked beautiful, that means. "Hello, Timothy," said grandfather, and climbing the railing with ease, he put his arms the bars on the cage. The tiger approached the bars. That means the tiger came close to the bars and allowed grandfather to put both hands around his head. Grandfather stroked the tiger's forehead and tickled his ears, and whenever he growled, smacked him across the mouth, which was his old way of keeping him quiet. Now this is the way grandfather used to behave with the tiger and love the tiger, that is Timothy, and was doing the same things now. It licked grandfather's hands and only sprang away when a leopard in the near cage snarled at him. The tiger was close to grandfather, but whenever a leopard on the nearby cage snarled at him or growled at him, it went away. Grandfather shooed the leopard away. That means he made him go away. And the tiger returned to lick his hands. But every now and then the leopard would rush at the bars and he would slink back to his corner. A number of people had gathered to watch the reunion when a keeper pushed his way through the crowd and asked grandfather what he was doing. "I'm talking to Timothy," said grandfather. "Weren't you there when I gave him to the zoo 6 months ago?" grandfather asked the keeper. "I haven't been here very long," said the surprised keeper. "Please continue your conversation, but I have never been able to touch him myself, as he is always very bad-tempered." The keeper told the grandfather that I have never been able to touch the tiger because he is very bad-tempered. "Why don't you put him somewhere else?" suggested grandfather. "The leopard has frightened him. I'll go and see the superintendent about it." So grandfather said to remove the tiger from there, or the leopard from there, so that because the leopard was all the time scaring him. Grandfather was in search of the superintendent of the zoo, but found that he had gone home early, and so after wandering about the zoo for a little while, he returned to Timothy's cage to say goodbye. It was beginning to get dark. He had been stroking and slapping Timothy, that is patting Timothy, for about 5 minutes when he found another keeper observing him with some alarm. That means with some surprise. Grandfather recognized him as the keeper who had been there when Timothy had first come to the zoo. "You remember me?" said grandfather. "Now, why don't you transfer Timothy to another cage away from this stupid leopard?" Grandfather was telling this to the keeper. "But sir," stammered the keeper, "it is not your tiger." I know," said grandfather testily. That means he was trying to test the keeper. "I realize he is no longer mine, but you might at least take a suggestion or two from me." He said that at least take the suggestion. The keeper said, "I remember your tiger very well," said the keeper. "He died 2 months ago." "Died?" exclaimed grandfather. He was surprised. "Yes, sir, of pneumonia. The tiger died of pneumonia. This tiger was trapped in the hills only last month, and he is very dangerous." Grandfather could think of nothing to say. Grandfather was taken aback. He was surprised. The tiger was still licking his arm with increasing relish, with a lot of love and taste. Grandfather took what seemed to him an age to withdraw his hand from the cage. He said he thought that it was time to remove his hand from the cage. With his face near the tigers, he mumbled, "Good night, Timothy," and giving the keeper a scornful look, walked briskly out of the zoo. That means grandfather finally realized that it was not his tiger, and Timothy was gone. 2 months back he died, and just whispered to this tiger, "Good night, Timothy," and he said goodbye and went away, feeling a bit upset and silly at the same time. But yes, he was saved. Otherwise, after some time, maybe this tiger would have tried to bite him. So grandfather went away then from the zoo.